The story begins with a man named Daniel. He was a millionaire, known in the city for his expensive cars, his big house, and the loud parties he often hosted. People admired his wealth, but many also whispered about his arrogance. He was young, handsome, and successful in business, but his heart was full of pride. He liked to laugh at people he thought were not as perfect as him. One evening, Daniel threw another grand party at his mansion. The house was filled with music, laughter, and the smell of rich food. His friends gathered around him, glasses of wine in their hands, all dressed in the latest designer clothes. They were talking about relationships, beauty, and what kind of people deserved love. One of his closest friends, Adam, laughed and said, "Daniel, you always chase the most beautiful women. But tell me, do you think you could ever marry someone who doesn't look like a model?" Daniel smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Of course I could marry anyone. For me, life is a game. Looks don't matter if I decide to win a challenge." The group roared with laughter and Adam pushed him further. "All right then. Why don't you prove it? Why don't you marry a woman who isn't slim, who isn't what society calls perfect? Let's see if you can handle that." Daniel's pride was touched. He hated being doubted. He enjoyed showing his friends that nothing was impossible for him. "Fine," Daniel said with confidence. "I'll do it. I'll marry a woman who is not what you call beautiful. I'll marry her, and I'll show you all that I can live with anyone, no matter what she looks like." The bet was set, and his friends laughed louder, clinking their glasses. They thought it was just another one of Daniel's arrogant games. But Daniel, blinded by his pride, took it seriously. He was determined to win this challenge. A few weeks later, Daniel went out into the city. He visited charity events, small gatherings, and even public parks, looking for someone who fit the description his friends mocked about. That's when he noticed a woman named Sarah. Sarah was not slim like the women Daniel usually chased. She was a plus-size woman, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. She worked as a community helper, often organizing food drives for poor families and helping children with their schoolwork. Daniel first saw her in a community center, where she was busy arranging food packages for people in need. She was sweating from the hard work, but her face glowed with kindness. She laughed warmly with the children and spoke gently to the elderly. Daniel watched from a distance. He thought to himself, "She is perfect for the bet. My friends will be shocked if I marry her." He walked up to Sarah and started a conversation. At first she was surprised. Why would a rich man like him be interested in her? But Daniel had charm and he knew how to use it. He praised her kindness, told her she had a beautiful smile, and acted like he truly admired her. Sarah was shy, but she felt flattered. Nobody had spoken to her like that in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept visiting her. He offered to help with her projects, sometimes bringing food donations, sometimes just showing up to see her. Slowly, Sarah began to trust him. She thought he was different from other rich men, someone who actually cared about ordinary people. Daniel hid his real motive and played his role perfectly. One afternoon, while they were walking near the park, Daniel suddenly stopped and said, "Sarah, I want to ask you something important." Sarah looked at him, confused. "What is it, Daniel?" He went down on one knee and pulled out a small ring. "Will you marry me?" Sarah gasped. Her heart raced. Nobody had ever proposed to her before. She had always believed she might not be someone's first choice because of her size. She doubted herself many times, but here was Daniel, a rich and admired man, asking her to marry him. Tears filled her eyes and she whispered, "Yes." Daniel smiled and slipped the ring on her finger. He thought about how shocked his friends would be when they found out. To him, it was just the first step in winning the bet. To Sarah, it was the happiest moment of her life. The news spread quickly. Sarah's neighbors were amazed. Some were happy for her, saying she deserved love. Others were suspicious, wondering why a millionaire like Daniel would choose her. But Sarah believed in him. She believed that love could break any barrier. The wedding was arranged quickly. Daniel spared no expense. The ceremony was grand, filled with flowers, lights, and music. Sarah wore a simple but elegant dress, her face glowing with joy. Daniel looked confident, shaking hands and smiling at his wealthy friends who had come to witness it. But behind the laughter and music, the whispers continued. Many of Daniel's friends joked among themselves. They thought he was crazy. Some said he's really doing it just for a laugh. Others said, "This won't last long. He's only proving a point." Sarah, however, ignored the whispers. She held Daniel's hand tightly and smiled at him, believing he truly cared. Her heart was pure and she wanted to give her best to the marriage. That night, when the wedding celebrations ended, Daniel stood alone for a moment, looking at his new wife as she greeted guests with kindness and warmth. For the first time, a strange feeling touched his heart. She looked genuinely happy and she treated everyone with respect, from the richest guest to the humblest servant. Daniel shook his head, pushing the thought away. "It's just a game," he whispered to himself. "I'm only here to win the bet." But deep inside, a small voice told him that this was not going to be as simple as he thought. After the wedding, life began to change for Sarah. She moved into Daniel's grand mansion, a place so large that she often got lost in the endless hallways. The marble floors sparkled, chandeliers hung from the ceilings, and luxury was everywhere. For Sarah, who had grown up in a simple neighborhood, it felt like stepping into another world. At first, she was shy and careful, afraid she might do something wrong. She tried to carry herself with grace, but she felt the stares. The mansion staff, used to Daniel's glamorous girlfriends, didn't know what to think of Sarah. Some respected her immediately because of her gentle manner, while others whispered behind her back, wondering how long this marriage would last. Daniel, on the other hand, carried himself as if everything was normal. He introduced Sarah as his wife at business dinners and public events. His wealthy friends, however, could not hide their surprise. Many of them whispered and laughed quietly, mocking Sarah's looks and questioning Daniel's choice. They believed it was just a phase or a stunt, something he was doing for amusement. Sarah noticed the whispers, but she pretended not to hear. She focused on treating everyone with kindness. She thanked the staff for their hard work, helped serve food at the table, and even spent time listening to the gardeners and cleaners. Slowly, some of the staff grew fond of her. They realized she respected them in a way that Daniel never had before. One evening, Daniel hosted a dinner party for his business associates. The long dining table was covered with fine dishes and crystal glasses. Everyone was dressed elegantly. Sarah sat beside Daniel, trying to look confident, though she could feel eyes on her. Halfway through the evening, one of the guests made a cruel joke about women who did not fit the mold. The table erupted in laughter, except for Sarah, who sat quietly. Daniel chuckled too, not realizing how much it hurt her. But instead of shrinking into silence, Sarah lifted her chin and said calmly, "Real beauty is not about size or shape. It is about how you treat people when nobody is watching." The room fell silent for a moment. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, others avoided her eyes. Then Sarah smiled and continued eating, as if nothing had happened. Her words lingered in the air, leaving everyone thoughtful. Daniel glanced at her, a little surprised. He had expected her to feel embarrassed or angry. Instead, she carried herself with dignity. For the first time, he felt something stir inside him, an admiration he couldn't quite explain. As the weeks passed, Daniel started noticing small things about Sarah. She always woke up early, long before him, to write in her journal and plan her day. She often visited community centers and brought food or books for children. She didn't ask for his money. She used her own small savings for these acts of kindness. When Daniel offered large donations, she politely refused, saying, "Help is not about showing power. It's about giving from the heart." This confused Daniel. He was used to people admiring his wealth, begging for his attention or trying to impress him. Sarah was different. She never asked for anything. She only gave. One afternoon, Daniel walked into the garden and found Sarah sitting on the grass with a group of neighborhood children. She was telling them stories, her hands moving expressively, her laughter filling the air. The children adored her. They listened with wide eyes, clapping when she finished a story. Daniel stood in the distance, watching. A strange warmth filled his chest. He didn't realize he had been smiling until one of the children noticed him. "Is he your husband?" the little boy asked innocently. Sarah nodded with a gentle smile. "Yes, this is Daniel." The children greeted him with cheer, but Daniel felt awkward. He was not used to being introduced as Sarah's husband. Usually he was the star, the millionaire everyone admired. But in this moment it was Sarah who shone brighter. That night Daniel sat alone in his study thinking about everything. Why does she make people feel so happy? Why do I feel different around her? He shook his head, reminding himself of the bet. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't deny the respect growing in his heart. The real test came a few weeks later. Daniel's friends invited him and Sarah to a private gathering. It was held in a luxury club where only the richest of the rich gathered. Sarah dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her hair neatly tied back. She walked into the hall with confidence, holding Daniel's arm. At first, the evening went smoothly. People greeted them, though many eyes followed Sarah with curiosity. But then, one of Daniel's closest friends, Adam, the same man who had pushed him into the bet, decided to test Sarah. He said loudly, so everyone could hear, "Daniel, I must admit, your wife is unique. But don't you think she looks a little out of place here?" The crowd chuckled. Daniel froze, unsure how to respond. His old self would have laughed along, but now he felt something twist in his chest. Before he could speak, Sarah gently placed her hand on the table and looked directly at Adam. "You know," she said softly, "I may not belong to your world of diamonds and champagne, but I belong to the world where kindness matters, where children need food and where people help each other without expecting anything in return. If that makes me out of place here, I'm proud of it." The hall went silent. No one dared to laugh. Even Adam looked embarrassed, shifting in his chair. Daniel sat in shock. His heart pounded as he looked at Sarah. He realized she had more courage than most people he knew. She had spoken with truth and grace, not anger. That moment changed something inside him. For the first time, he felt ashamed. Not of Sarah, but of himself. When they returned home that night, Sarah walked quietly to her room. She didn't mention the incident, as if it didn't bother her. But Daniel couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in his mind. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking himself questions he had avoided for so long. Why did I marry her? Was it just for the bet? And if it was, why do I feel proud to call her my wife now? For the first time, Daniel began to doubt himself. The man who once thought life was only about power and pride was now questioning everything. He didn't realize it yet, but the game he had started for fun was slowly turning into the biggest lesson of his life. Life after that evening at the luxury club was not the same for Daniel. For the first time, he could not stop thinking about Sarah's words. He had seen her face insults with calmness, and instead of breaking, she had stood stronger. That image stayed in his mind. The man who once felt proud of himself for wealth and power now felt small in front of his wife's dignity. Sarah, however, did not change. She remained the same, gentle, kind, and thoughtful. Every morning she prepared breakfast not only for Daniel but also for the staff. She often carried a tray herself to the kitchen, asking the cooks if they had eaten. The maids who once whispered behind her back began to adore her. They felt respected, something they had never experienced from Daniel before. One morning, Daniel walked into the dining hall and found Sarah serving tea to the gardeners. He frowned, confused. "Why are you serving them?" "We have staff for this." Sarah looked at him and smiled. "Daniel, respect is not only about paying salaries. Sometimes offering a cup of tea yourself is worth more than money. It shows people that you see them as human beings, not just workers." Her words struck him. Daniel did not reply, but that morning he felt something move in his heart again. He was not used to such simplicity in his world of luxury. The change became more obvious when they attended another social event. This time it was a charity gala. Rich businessmen, their wives, and celebrities filled the grand hall. The evening was about raising money for children's education, but most people came only to show off their wealth. Expensive gowns sparkled, diamonds shone, and laughter echoed in the air. Daniel arrived with Sarah by his side. Many people turned their heads, whispering again. Some smiled politely, others pretended not to see her, but Sarah did not shrink back. She walked with confidence, her head held high, her smile soft but strong. During the gala, a group of businessmen began to talk about donations. Each one tried to outdo the other, announcing large sums with pride. Then one of them looked at Sarah and asked mockingly, "And what about you, Mrs. Daniel? Do you also plan to donate $1 million today?" There was laughter around the table. Sarah, however, stayed calm. She looked at the man and said, "I cannot give $1 million, but I can give what I have. And more than that, I give my time. Every week I teach children in the community center to read and write. Money can build schools, but love and time build children's hearts." The hall grew quiet again. Many people lowered their eyes. Even Daniel's chest swelled with something he hadn't felt before. Pride, but not the arrogant kind. He was proud of her. That night, after they returned home, Daniel sat silently in the living room. Sarah walked past him with a tired smile, saying she was going to rest, but Daniel stayed awake, replaying her words. He realized she had more influence on people than he ever had, and not because of wealth but because of her genuine care. The next day, Daniel made an unplanned visit to the community center where Sarah worked. He wanted to see for himself what she did there. He drove without telling her, and when he arrived, he stayed in his car for a while, watching through the window. Inside, he saw Sarah surrounded by children. She was teaching them how to write letters on a blackboard. The children laughed when she made funny mistakes on purpose, and she laughed with them. After class, she handed out small sandwiches she had prepared herself. Some of the children hugged her, calling her Auntie Sarah. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had lived in the same city all his life but had never seen this world. The world of ordinary people who lived with little yet shared so much love. And there, in the center of it all, was his wife. Later that evening, Daniel asked Sarah why she never told him about her work. She smiled and said, "I didn't think it mattered to you. But to me, these children matter. They remind me that life is more than money and power." Her words pierced through him. That night, Daniel could not sleep again. He began to feel the weight of guilt pressing on him. He remembered the cruel bet. He had married her not out of love, but to prove something to his friends. Yet here she was, teaching him lessons he had never learned in his entire life. The breaking point came one weekend when Daniel's friends visited the mansion. They gathered in the living room, laughing and drinking, the same way they always did. Adam, who had started the bet, leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "You've won, my friend. You've lived with her long enough. Soon you can end this joke and move on." Daniel froze. For the first time, he felt anger at those words. He looked at Sarah, who was serving snacks to the guests with her usual smile, unaware of the cruelty around her. His stomach twisted with shame. Adam continued, "Tell us, Daniel, how much longer will you keep this up? A month, 2? Then you'll be free." Daniel slammed his glass on the table. Everyone fell silent. Sarah looked up, startled. "Enough," Daniel said firmly. His voice carried weight it had never carried before. "This is not a joke. She is my wife, and I will not let anyone speak of her like this again." The room grew still. His friends exchanged surprised glances. Adam laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but Daniel's eyes were sharp. For the first time, he defended Sarah openly. That night, when the guests left, Sarah sat quietly in their bedroom. She could sense something was wrong. "Daniel," she said softly, "what's troubling you?" He looked at her for a long time, his heart heavy. Finally, he confessed, his voice breaking. "Sarah, I need to tell you the truth. When I married you, it wasn't out of love. It was a bet. My friends challenged me and I was foolish. I thought it was just a game. But I was wrong. You've shown me what real strength is. You've shown me what love looks like. And I don't deserve you." Sarah's face grew pale. She sat in silence, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment, Daniel feared she would walk out and he would lose her forever. But Sarah took a deep breath and whispered, "I knew something was strange at the start, but I chose to believe in you. Daniel, people can make mistakes. What matters is whether they are willing to change." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly broken. Not because of failure in business, but because of failure in his heart. Yet Sarah, the woman he had married as part of a cruel bet, was giving him a chance to become better. After Daniel confessed the truth, the air in the room grew heavy. Sarah sat silently on the edge of the bed, her hands folded tightly together. Her eyes looked down, not at Daniel, but at the floor, as if searching for strength. Daniel stood there, feeling like a guilty child, afraid to lose everything he never realized mattered until now. Finally, Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm, though her heart was trembling inside. "Daniel, what you did was cruel. A marriage should never begin as a joke. I trusted you. I gave you my heart. And to know it was only a bet, it hurts more than I can explain." Daniel lowered his head. "I know, I was blind with pride. I thought life was about winning challenges and impressing friends. But Sarah, I swear I've changed. You've changed me. Please don't walk away." Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Daniel, love is not something you win. It is something you grow. Right now, I cannot say I forgive you, but I will give you one choice. Either you continue living as the man who plays with lives for his ego, or you grow into the man who truly deserves respect." Her words pierced Daniel's heart. He realized this was no longer about a bet or pride. It was about who he wanted to become. The following weeks were difficult. Sarah became quiet, no longer as open with him as before. She still performed her daily acts of kindness, teaching children, helping the staff, visiting the sick, but her laughter was less frequent. Daniel noticed the difference, and it hurt him deeply. Determined to change, Daniel started small. He began spending time with Sarah at the community center. At first, the children did not know what to make of him. They were shy, even scared of the tall, serious man who always wore expensive suits. But Daniel tried. He read stories to them, though awkwardly. He helped carry heavy boxes even when his back ached. Slowly, the children warmed up to him, and their smiles began to soften his heart. One day, as Daniel struggled to explain a math problem to a little boy, Sarah watched from across the room. For the first time in weeks, her lips curved into a faint smile. Daniel noticed, and that small smile gave him hope. Back at home, Daniel also changed his behavior. He spoke kindly to the staff, thanking them for their work. He even joined them for meals once, shocking everyone. The maids whispered among themselves, saying, "The master has changed since Madam came." But not everyone welcomed this new Daniel. His old friends began to complain. They invited him to parties, but he refused. They mocked him for spending time in poor neighborhoods, for giving away money without expecting praise. Adam, the one who had started the bet, grew especially annoyed. One afternoon, Adam visited Daniel at his office. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded. "You've stopped coming to gatherings. You've stopped living the life we built together. Are you really falling for her?" "Don't tell me you've forgotten the bet." Daniel looked at him with steady eyes. "The bet was a mistake. Sarah is not part of your game. She is my wife, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me." Adam laughed bitterly. "You've gone soft? Love has made you weak." "No," Daniel replied firmly. "Love has made me stronger than I've ever been." That evening, Daniel told Sarah about the confrontation. She listened quietly, her eyes filled with thought. "Daniel," she said softly, "true change is not easy. People will laugh at you, they will question you. But if you truly want to be different, you must stand firm." Her words encouraged him. For the first time, Daniel felt he was no longer living for pride or ego, but for something real. Weeks later, Sarah was invited to speak at a small event about community work. Nervous, she stood before a group of parents and teachers, explaining the importance of kindness and respect. Daniel sat in the back row watching with admiration. He saw how people leaned in to listen, how her simple words touched their hearts more than any business speech he had ever given. After the event, Daniel walked up to her, holding her hand. "Sarah, I don't know how to repay you. You've taught me what wealth cannot buy. I only ask for one chance, to prove to you that I can be the man you deserve." Sarah looked into his eyes. For the first time since his confession, she saw honesty shining in them. "Daniel," she whispered, "my words are easy. Show me through your actions," and so he did. Daniel began using his wealth differently. Instead of throwing lavish parties, he funded schools, hospitals, and community centers. But he did it quietly, without flashing his name in bold letters. He joined Sarah in her projects, often working side by side with ordinary people. The city began to notice. Articles were written about the new Daniel, the millionaire who cared more about children than champagne. But the most important change was in his home. Daniel and Sarah began to talk more again. Slowly, her laughter returned. She still carried scars from his betrayal, but she also saw the man he was becoming. One evening, as they sat in the garden under the stars, Sarah said, "Daniel, I won't pretend I've forgotten the pain, but I can see you are trying, and that means more than anything. You're not the man I first met. You're becoming someone better." Daniel reached for her hand, his eyes misty. "That's all I want, Sarah, to be worthy of you." From that night, a new chapter began between them. Their relationship was no longer built on lies or bets, but on growth and truth. Daniel knew he could never erase the past, but with every day, he was determined to build a future that Sarah could be proud of. The mansion, once filled with shallow laughter and pride, now echoed with a different kind of joy. The laughter of children, the chatter of volunteers, and the quiet peace of a couple learning to rebuild trust. And though the road was still long, Daniel finally understood the meaning of Sarah's words. Love is not something you win. It is something you grow day by day with honesty, respect, and care. Months had passed since Daniel confessed the truth to Sarah. Their life had slowly changed, and so had their relationship. The marriage that began as a cruel bet had now become something else, something fragile but real. Daniel had worked hard to change himself, not with grand speeches but through daily actions. But deep inside, he knew he still had to prove to Sarah that his transformation was lasting and true. One morning, Sarah woke up to find Daniel already gone. She thought he must have gone to a meeting, but when she asked the staff, no one knew where he was. Curious, she decided to follow her instinct and went to the community center. There she found Daniel, not in his expensive suit but in simple clothes, carrying boxes of food for the children. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hair messy, but his face shone with determination. The children ran around him, some tugging at his sleeve, others laughing as he pretended to play with them. Sarah stood quietly at the door, her eyes softening. This was not the proud, arrogant man she had married months ago. This was someone else, someone who had learned to bend down, to work hard, to serve others without expecting applause. When he noticed her, he smiled sheepishly. "I thought you'd still be asleep." Sarah walked closer. "And miss this?" she teased lightly. But her heart swelled with pride. That afternoon, Sarah and Daniel sat under a tree near the community center, watching the children play. Daniel turned to her and said, "Sarah, I've lived my whole life chasing respect through wealth. But I see now that respect is earned through the way you live, not through the things you own. You taught me that." Sarah smiled faintly. "Daniel, people can change if they want to, and I can see you truly want to." Their bond grew stronger with each passing week. They began to spend more time together, not in luxury parties but in simple moments. Cooking meals at home, reading stories to children, walking through the park hand in hand. Slowly, the distance between them closed. But the final test came when Daniel's old friends tried once more to drag him back. Adam invited him to a grand party, the kind Daniel used to host. When Daniel arrived with Sarah, the atmosphere felt the same as before. Music, laughter, and pride in every corner. Adam raised a glass and said loudly, "Daniel, tell us the truth. You married her as a bet and we all know it. But now look at you, living like a saint. Do you really expect us to believe you love her?" The room burst into cruel laughter. All eyes turned to Daniel. The old Daniel might have laughed along or stayed silent. But the man who stood there now was different. He placed his arm gently around Sarah and looked directly at Adam. His voice was steady, his words firm. "Yes, it began as a bet, and I am ashamed of it. But what began as a mistake turned into the greatest blessing of my life. Sarah is my wife, my partner, and the reason I became a better man. If you cannot respect her, then you cannot call yourself my friend." The hall went silent. Adam's smirk faded. Some guests looked down in embarrassment. Others exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, Daniel had broken free from their shallow world. He took Sarah's hand and walked out, leaving the glittering hall behind. Outside, under the night sky, Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, "do you know what you just did?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, I finally let go of the man I used to be." From that night onward, Daniel never returned to that old circle. He built a new life with Sarah, one based on honesty, respect, and service. His wealth was still there, but he used it with purpose, to fund schools, support hospitals, and help communities grow. People in the city began to talk, not about his cars or parties, but about his generosity and Sarah's kindness. Together, they became symbols of change, proof that even the proudest heart could be humbled, and even the most broken beginning could lead to something beautiful. One day, Sarah stood at the community center, watching Daniel lead a group of volunteers. She remembered the first time she saw him, the rich man who had walked into her simple world hiding his true intentions. If someone had told her then that this man would one day stand beside her as her partner in kindness, she would never have believed it, but here he was. That evening, as they sat together in the garden, Daniel held her hand and said, "Sarah, I once thought I was marrying you for a bet. But the truth is I was the one who won. Not the bet, but your heart, your love, and the chance to live a better life." Sarah's eyes softened. She leaned closer and whispered, "Daniel, it was never about winning or losing. It was about learning, and you've learned well." The stars glittered above them as they sat in silence, holding each other's hands. Their journey had been painful, messy, and full of mistakes, but in the end, love had grown where no one expected it. Daniel had married Sarah as a bet, but he stayed with her because he discovered something far more valuable than pride or wealth. He discovered the true meaning of love, and that was the greatest shock of all.